Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's panel on the navigating the future of AI coding assistance, trends and best practices. My name is Clinton Herget. I'm the field CTO at Sneak, which, if you're not aware, is pronounced like sneaking around or a pair of sneakers. It's also an acronym, stands for So Now You Know. And hopefully at the end of our session today, we'll all know a little bit more about the future of AI-based assistance for software development. I am joined by four experts in the field today. So without further ado, let's bring up our panel. And I'm going to start here with Jeff Wang, Head of Business at Codium. Jeff, welcome to the panel today. And what's the first thing that's on your mind to discuss in this conversation?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And the first thing on my mind is really just to talk about where the space is going, and hopefully other people that are listening in can learn a thing or two.
I certainly hope so as well. And to add to that, we also have Lucy Gao, the co-founder of Tabby ML. Lucy, welcome. How are you doing today? And what kind of questions are you bringing to the table?
Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me here. I'm here because I'm super excited about AI coding in the future, and especially security is a concern for a lot of the large enterprises when adopting generative AI. So I'm excited to talk about this here.
We will certainly have some time for the security conversation a little bit later in today's panel. As Sneak, a security vendor, we are especially interested in some of the vulnerability implications of machine-generated code. Next year, I have Brandon Jung, VP of Ecosystem at Tabnine. Brandon, welcome. And what's on your mind
Hey,
today?
I echo that a little bit. The security for sure, privacy in terms of in control, and then personalization. So I think there's a huge opportunity here, and what we're seeing for where we've been in big, large general models to moving towards specific models, change models, better ways of using the tools that we got, along with integrating it into a bunch of good pieces. So I'm sure we'll cover a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a hugely important question, especially for those of us who might not be as familiar with sort of the under the hood aspect of machine learning. Kind of what are some of the differences between maybe the LLMs plus more specific models? What kind of training data are you using to learn from, et cetera? So I'm really curious to get into those aspects as well. And then last but not least, we have Itamar Friedman, co-founder and CEO of CodiumAI. Itamar, welcome to the panel. And what are some of the questions you're bringing to us today?
Thank you. Awesome being here. So I'm very excited about how AI could help us and the developers in those tedious yet critical tasks further than autocomplete or chatting about code.
Yeah, absolutely. Toil reduction, right, is on the mind of everybody, I think, who's ever built software for a living. And that includes me, by the way. I was a software developer for about 20 years before coming over to Sneak. So really interested in this kind of explosion we've seen over the past couple of years in generative AI to extend developer productivity and really kind of increase their velocity. So I'm hoping to learn a lot from this conversation as well. So without further ado, let's kind of dive in. And I'd love to start with you, Lucy. And what I'm interested in is sort of how is the landscape of coding assistance changing in terms of accessibility and inclusivity for developers of all skill levels? Because it really seems to me that the use of Gen AI coding can almost sort of democratize the art of software engineering. What does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for the question, Clinton. The AI coding assistant landscape has definitely transformed significantly in recent years, especially due to the amazing capabilities bring to us from the large language models. One of the most impactful trends that I observe has been shifting towards making the tools usable by a much broader range of developers, from the beginners to the more senior engineers. And for developers that's just starting out, I'll say coding assistants kind of serve as a real-time mentor. They guide them through best practices, offer suggestions, and help them understand coding principles on the go. This real-time feedback can accelerate learning and also boost confidence for those new to the field. And for the more experienced developers, the value kind of lies in automating a lot of repetitive tasks and helping them to focus more on the complex and creative and exciting aspects of the development. When also talking to them, we also observe that there's a growing demand to integrate AI capabilities across the broader developer lifecycle, fitting into more complex workflow and adapting to the evolving requirements. And I'll say this is actually where a more open, more flexible, and accessible platform like Tabby can be helpful. Many organizations have very unique tech stacks, very stringent security standards, and specific compliance needs. Open source platforms like Tabby can make it easier to fit into different companies' particular development process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that integration question is really a key one, right? As we know, developers love their tools and they don't necessarily love having to context switch out of those tools. So the more that integration story can really complete the picture, I at least from my perspective as a developer, that's kind of where you're getting that adoption. Well, actually, Jeff, I'd love to get your kind of input on that. How do you see the integration of coding assistants evolving with other sorts of developer tools here over the next few years?
You know, it's funny. I think in general, LLMs and AI are just going to be integrated in every surface area we touch. I think Apple Intelligence is going to be all over our phones, and Meta AI is going to be in your glasses. And I think the trend will be the same for coding assistants. I think we're going to see more and more IDEs have just coding assistants built in. I know Codium has, I think, over 40 IDEs that we support, and like over 70 languages. And I think our philosophy is that we should work equally well with all these surfaces and all these different developer tools. And even with SCMs, like we should not require different SCMs to have different experiences. We do not want to leave any developer behind, right? But I also think that coding is just one part of the whole day of the developer. And I think the second thing is like we're going to expand to, or coding assistants will expand to more than just the coding part. It'll be also the software development lifecycle. Because you think about it, what if you 10x the coding part? Then you're going to need more things to code, right? So you could have more time spent on the design or the creativity. And on the other side, probably more time with testing and security. And then just downstream, all the stuff, the rest of the stuff in the software development lifecycle. So just imagine more and more integrations everywhere in more and more tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even know there were 40 IDEs until just now. So I definitely have already learned something today. Actually, so Brandon, I'm interested in kind of getting your reaction to what Jeff just said in terms of like what's next. What are some of the emerging trends in code completion tools beyond just the use cases we've seen today, and particularly from a developer perspective, like what should maybe I be aware of in terms of what's coming next?
Sure. So I think agree with Jeff. I mean, naturally, as the company that founded the space, this has always been our view of like you got to meet the developer where they are from beginning to end, from Jira to code commit to the security pieces afterwards. Obviously, that's what we've chatted with Sneak in the past and all the work based there. So I wouldn't. I think Jeff said it well. I think when we think about it, I think there's probably three levels when we think about this space. It's just super helpful for, and this will be useful outside of this conversation. But there's the application layer, and I think Jeff did a reasonable good job of like, hey, that's pretty broad, and it'll continue to expand in terms it fits. You're really going to have the model layer, and we can have fun discussions around that. And then you have the data that goes into the model. And I think when you think about those are sort of three good foundational ways to think about. Those are probably the three pillars around where those are evolving. And I think the interesting aspect around this sort of building on Jeff's statement is, I think there's going to be kind of two takes on this. I think the platform providers are motivated, one in particular, Microsoft, to put as much as possible on Azure and into GitHub and through that process. So, hey, that's their business model, and that's what we would expect. That said, anyone that's a developer knows that we're curmudgeons, we're grumpy, we like new thing, we're going to be playing with a lot of stuff. So I think the idea that all of that is going to be consolidated into a single platform, I think you're going to have a pull and tug on that. But there's some big downsides to the notion of integrating all that into one platform. And so I think that's going to be the debate. I think if you'd gone back a year, moving into a single platform probably had some legs. I think it's now become clear that given the models, the cost of them, the size of them, honestly, the speed they move, the models aren't going to be necessarily the most important part. And so as you move away from models, it becomes who has good integrations, how does it fit into the life cycle of the developer, and how do you help with personalization, right, of the model and the underlying data.
Yeah, particularly when, as you say, developers hate being boxed in, right, to a particular ecosystem. And so, and Lucy, I think you mentioned that earlier, the ability to have sort of an open platform that can flexibly fit into all these different surfaces really does seem to be key here. Itamar, I don't want to leave you out of this conversation, but I would love to bring it back to something you mentioned earlier, kind of the toil reduction from the developer perspective. And in particular, what role do you think the coding assistants will play in kind of improving code quality, doing a lot of those things developers are not maybe necessarily interested in versus their ability to create new functionality? I'm thinking in terms of like technical debt reduction, right? What role do the code assistants have to play there?
Yeah, awesome. First, I think we can separate, although it's like maybe a bit hard to split, but between professional consumers, like for example, freelancers that are doing like a 5-page website, etc., which or more, it could be more complicated. I think for them, for example, the coding assistant that we see recently really created maybe 10x performance boost. But when you're looking on enterprise complex software, then I really agree with everything that was said here, that basically you just moved, the bottleneck from writing code to testing, code review, etc. And I think that actually testing, code review, etc., is freaking hard task to do. Any of us are trying to do that. Probably some of us maybe even causing the world stop running, not doing it properly, right? We saw that these cases as well. It's really hard task, and LLM by themselves are not going to solve these problems. Having said that, I think that you can combine engineering techniques that we know already from the Greek era and all the way through the last 50 years of software development, and you can solve some of the bottlenecks and some of the areas that were inefficient with LLM, and eventually create systems that can help us increase code quality, increase our capacity to do proper testing of many kinds, code review, etc. And then as we write more AI help us write more code, then AI with other engineering techniques also help us reviewing and testing. So it's definitely like one of the most critical, if not the most critical, stepping stone to actually enjoy AI in software development for enterprise, for complex code, and in my opinion. And I think like differently than AI assistant, the LLM by themselves are not 90% of the technology, rather an enabler to now build solutions. So that's what I think like we're going to see in 2025, by the way. A lot of these code quality, like CodiumAI, solution being adopted ubiquitously if you really want to use coding assistants. I think we see different angles of coding assistant. Like there is different between Codium, Tabnine, Tabby. At CodiumAI, we started different than Codium and others. CodiumAI, we started with the notion that to really like get to the next level of code generation, I'm not talking about code quality. To get to the next level of code generation, you have to step through code quality, because you can't like really automate the amount of code that you can with AI without verifying that it also works as expected. I'm not going to touch about it right now, but we kind of proved that with our Alpha Codium open sourced. We competed in coding competitions, and we did better than DeepMind, OpenAI, and Salesforce because we combined code generation with testing and reviewing. We call it code integrity. By the way, O1 just broke record in that coding competition, but stay tuned. Maybe you'll see very soon like another record going to be that's going to be broken there, because again, combining the code generation with testing, code review, and other code quality elements.
Yeah, I think it's a really important distinction, right, between sort of the ability to generate code versus the ability to understand it, right, and therefore improve the quality. And I think we'll get to this a little bit more when we talk about security here in a minute, and how you can actually use some of these assistants in combination with other sorts of AI-based tools to maybe ensure that that code is where you want it to be from a risk and vulnerability perspective. But for now, I'd love to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about some of the best practices about how these tools can be implemented, especially by by these sort of enterprise high performing software delivery teams. And Jeff, maybe we kick it back over to you. How do you think development teams can maybe ensure they're maximizing the benefits of some of these assistants without, though, becoming overly reliant on them? Because as we're saying, there's still that whole toil area of testing and verification that developers are going to need to use. So we can't lock into saying, I've forgotten how to write code. I only know how to use prompts and interact with an assistant. So how do you see the best practices there shaping out?
Yeah, it's funny. Like when I got my first car, my mom said, don't get the GPS feature because then you're gonna forget how to read maps. And then now I feel like everybody just relies on GPS, right? It's kind of a thing that people have forgotten about. But like, for example, people still learn about mathematics, right, in school, and people still use calculators, right? So there is some foundation that some people still need to know how to code and still should be educated in some use cases, right? But there will be some people that don't know how to code, and they could use tools such as the ones in this room here. And then it's okay to be reliant on those use cases. And then there's going to be another subset of more advanced and maybe more like code that's not in the LLM that people probably need to get better at. But there are tools within these coding assistants to kind of explain the code or have, for example, our tool can do full repo context awareness and even multi-repo context awareness. And if somebody is curious of how something is working, they could actually chat and ask about questions about the code throughout all these repos and get the answer of how something was implemented. Even if it was generated by AI, I could ask the AI, why did you do it this way? And can you make this more secure? Can you make this faster? Can I generate tests on this code, right? And as long as the habit is to kind of keep that curiosity, keep understanding how the AI is generating the code, I think that will help in preventing people from being overly reliant on them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Keeping that sort of mental awareness as an engineer of understanding how all those pieces fit together. And then that actually kind of brings me back to sort of the integration conversation we were having earlier. So Brandon, I'm wondering sort of how you react to that. Like, what strategies maybe would you recommend for teams looking to more smoothly integrate these assistant tools into those existing workflows like we were talking about earlier?
Sure. So, I mean, some of the integration work is on the company. So integrations we have in the Jira or otherwise, and we'll continue to do those. I think there's that aspect. So choosing a tool perhaps that is doing that work and is flexible. I think from an adoption standpoint, when we chat with enterprises time and time again, I'd say an aspect that the teams aren't addressing from the get-go is what's your risk profile. So I think one of the things that would help an enormous amount around this for a lot of teams are how do you want to handle your code? So let's work with the very simple pieces. Are you okay putting and sending your code into a big black box somewhere? The answer is yes. Then your next question is, which black box are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with an OpenAI? Are you comfortable with Anthropic? Are you comfortable with Cohere? Are you comfortable with Mistral? All reasonable options, all options that Tabnine offers. However, a good number of customers are going to be laying on the others, which is I need full control, right? And you should ask that question before you go down this path because you're comparing apples and oranges, right? Because the second we go down the path that says, I need that model, all of that capabilities, whether it's like air gapped in its own environment that is completely locked off from the rest of the world, sneaker netted in, or at least in your VPC that you want control on, now we're in a different place. And so the implications of that are really important because at that point, then you're going to be pulling in a different model because that model is going to be running in your VPC. You're clearly not taking on, an Anthropic 3.5 size model. There's a trade-off to that, right? The trade-off is largely you don't get access to insanely to all the data that it's been trained on. On the flip side, like with Tabby, you know exactly what it is. We will tell you exactly all the code it was trained on. Is it a smaller model? Yes. But it's also great to customize. So now when you go into any of that personalization, if you want to fine tune it or et cetera, that's an opportunity. So you have optionality, but if you start from the standpoint, and we see this all the time with customers that start with, I'm just going to give it to my developers, let them say, which is great. Well, you're giving them an apple and an orange. So if you give a customer and says, this is a fully secure model that is we have secure, and then I'm going to open up and give you, the Wild West that comes in through Copilot. Cool. Like there's fun stuff in Copilot. Like, don't get me wrong. It's seeing code from, everywhere in the world, including a lot of places you might not want in your code base. Totally your choice. In some places that matters. But I think that place, I'd say, is that's the place people should start with. What matters to you? And then from there, there's going to be different solutions that fit based off that requirement. But I think that would be how teams should consider it, because then you can get in the details of like, hey, how well does it work in my environment? True, but make that decision in front, because it takes you down path A or path B.
Yeah, the understanding the difference in what is an apple and what is an orange, I think is really key in making a lot of those decisions. And I would agree, we often don't see that level of comparison being done. Therefore, it can be difficult to understand what you're actually looking at there. Inamar, I'm actually interested in kind of your view on this as well. Like from the code quality perspective, what are some challenges that you've seen teams encountering when trying to adopt some of those tools, and how are those often overcome in organizations that you've been working with?
Yeah, I agree with a lot what being said here, that when you as a developer or dev manager in enterprise or a big company, you want to try some coding assistant, or you want to improve one of your pipelines, workflows in your software development lifecycle. I think the first thing is actually think, what is the pain you're trying to solve? It sounds trivial, but it's not. And then when you actually like sit down and think about these, like, first of all, it's a good practice anyway, then you find out that your bottlenecks are maybe not, writing code faster or things like that. For example, one of our clients, Fortune 100, they care about making sure that APIs that are about to be deprecated, libraries and SDKs, will not be further used. That's one of their biggest pains. So, there's tools, sorry for a shameless plug, like CodiumAI that could help with that. Others are around, there are some best practices that we're really having hard time to apply, and then we're getting back to them. There are bugs that are returning over and over again to us, and we want to make sure that being reviewed properly. And each one of these problems actually will apply different integrations and different tool usage, maybe even different team that will champion using these tools. Could be like the developer platform tool, or whether the front-end tool, front-end developer team, etc. So what I think, like, the challenges that we see is that, hey, somebody coming, hey, I want to use Gen AI a bit because I heard like developers love it for software development. And then like basically you choose the tool according to some NPS, which is cool, like the developers like or not. But then did it really like help you move the needle? And then you realize you want to probably go through the quality, because there's so much research saying that improving quality is like much more sustainable to really boost productivity. But that's also not enough. The challenge is, hey, take a good look. What are your code quality problems? It's like death by 1,000 cuts. People got outages and downtime or bottlenecks that are different from each other. Get to know yours, and then go to search the right AI tool to help you eliminate that.
Absolutely. Lucy, does that resonate with you as well? And kind of what are you seeing in terms of best practices for training the developers to ask those sorts of questions as they incorporate some of this functionality into their day-to-day tasks?
Yeah, I definitely resonate a lot about kind of for enterprise, they need to understand kind of what exactly they want when adopting AI coding, and kind of understand the trade-offs between different model and different deployment options. And I will say I kind of can't emphasize a lot more than kind of encourage all the companies to, when adopting AI, to start with their clear objective. So when you are adopting AI, what's the problem that you want to solve? Is it to kind of improve the code quality, or to accelerate feature development, or kind of make the debugging easier? Like, what's the issue that I want to solve? Once you have, as a leadership, you have a clear thought, you will also make the developers who use the tool have a better idea about how I should be using the tool and what issues they can help fix. And I would say another aspect for a lot of enterprises that are adopting Tabby, I often encourage them to kind of build a more hands-on learning experience. So developers definitely learn best by using the tools in real time. And so creating opportunities for them to explore the tools through practical use cases is very important. This could often involve kind of incorporating the tools with some smaller internal projects first. So developers will feel more comfortable and confident in experimenting it with before kind of expanding it to a more critical and larger projects. And yeah, and as we also see, kind of AI coding has been evolving a lot over the years. Like kind of a lot of that start from code completion, and then gradually kind of adopting larger and larger models in chat, and then there's newer and newer applications now. So I often also encourage folks to kind of build a culture of continuous feedback and iteration. And so kind of choosing a platform that's more extensible, where it can be more flexible in integrating into different use cases and different kind of interactions. And I think all of that will be greatly helpful to kind of train the engineers and make this process, helping them use to be more smooth and kind of more productive.
Hey, Clinton, I heard like more than twice already, like talking about like the fact that you can use the AI assistants, coding AI assistants for learning. May I relate to that? So I think like right now in 2024, you still need to know a bit what you're asking. Yeah, you need to know what to ask to actually learn. And in my feeling, like all the 4 tools around here, like Codium, Tabnine, Tabby, CodiumAI, I have a feeling in 2025, you will see some advancement around helping the developer even to understand what to ask. Hey, you might want to look here. You are onboarding. Here will help you like to even ask the questions as you start. That's, I think, like kind of the even personalization that was discussed will go to like the tools will leash on the enterprise software and will help with very different tasks. And one of them is even helping those developers not necessarily know what to ask, not just necessarily because they're juniors. Maybe, for example, they just landed in an enterprise with 10,000 repos. So I think like that's really exciting direction that I think will happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because there are a lot of things that developers might not necessarily think to ask. And the one that occurs to me in terms of my line of work is security, right? Like you would maybe not think to prompt a coding assistant, generate me this piece of code that has this function and do it without vulnerabilities, right? Which sounds kind of straightforward. But I'm kind of wondering, how are we thinking about best practices around securing AI generated code? And how are you, maybe leveraging different security tools and processes within the workflows you're recommending to some of your customers? And Brandon, I'd love to start with you, because you mentioned earlier sort of the trade-offs between relying on the larger models versus the more customized and sort of flexible ones. Are you seeing differences there in terms of the security output of some of those tools? Or how would you think about advising a customer who has a concern around some of the risk they're potentially generating that might not be seen because of what might be perceived as overuse of coding assistants?
Sure. So there's a couple aspects to that. So you need to have a solid software development lifecycle. So I'm going to say what you already said. Like you put a good code. Tabnine kind of goes from code generation to testing. Like we cover a lot of stuff, but like you start putting the code generation on the front end of a process that isn't very strong. You put it on someone that hasn't, is not in the, top right part of the Dora metrics. It's not going to be fun. You're just putting more stuff down, just cramming more stuff down that space. So there's that aspect. So I think the part that is coming up, and it's coming up with a huge number of conversations, and frankly, very much, I think Europe's probably going to lead us out in this, is, it feels magical in machine learning, and particularly generative AI, awesome. We've been with machine learning before. It was generative AI, and then when it was, so been seeing it through this whole version. End of day, good data in, good data out. Bad data in, bad data out. Copyrighted code in, copyrighted code out. And we can pretend that isn't the case, but we've seen it again and again and again. And that's the question. So, again, some companies may not care. Europe, it's going to matter a lot, right? The AI Act has been passed. It is going to go into effect. And it says very clearly, you may not have copyrighted code in your model, period. Now, everyone's welcome to go check on this, but on stage, OpenAI's CTO doesn't know what's in their model. If you cannot put in full context exactly what went into the model, that outcome is one that will be one you have to wrestle through. So we're seeing in Europe, that's going to be probably the angle that's super important. Now, what it produces clearly, some of it will be secure, some of it will not be secure. It is by definition generative, and it's not perfect. So you need all those other tools, but I think there's an upstream question that is also going to exist here. And having bad code or having someone else's similar code in your code base does matter. Served at Google. We went through this with Oracle. It's billions of dollars that are sitting here that I think we're all kind of covering our eyes, pretending this doesn't exist. It's a question that people need to wrestle with. So that may be controversial, but it's certainly the things our customers are wrestling with. And one of the reasons, we ended up building a model that was fully permissive, open source, and that you could actually audit every bit that went into it. So that part, I think, is probably the part that's probably the sleeping giant of questions that's going to coming downhill in the next 6 months.
Yeah, I think we're here for the controversy, right? So appreciate your straightforward viewpoint there. Jeff, I see you kind of smiling. What's your take on it? Do you agree with where Brandon's going from that kind of risk and security perspective?
Yeah, I think a lot of things he said took a lot of effort to do. So like, for example, taking the non-permissive code out of the model. Even after the code is generated, we have like filtering to spot any license code. And even on our air-gapped or self-hosted deployments, we even have a way to detect license code as it's generated and log it if it happens, right? Even if it's a permissive license, we want to make sure everything is tracked. And I think like I don't want to make it sound like all generated code is bad. I mean, like if you have personalization, you can use your whole repo as context. You'll have less hallucinations. You'll be able to generate code that is actually much more accurate than possibly even a human could, right? And I obviously there's tools to like make code more secure and make more unit tests. But I think like overall, LLMs could also benefit in addition to all the code scanning tools as well. Like code scanning tools, by the way, are good for 0-day vulnerabilities, right? There's no way an LLM can catch those. So in conjunction, having these work together is actually going to be net beneficial, I think.
Well, I got to follow up though, because you did use the H word there. So maybe Itamar, like how do we think about the prevalence of hallucinations in some AI generated code? And then how would you advise customers from a security perspective to either augment with other kinds of testing tools or think about how to place that type of code gen or code completion in their pipeline, understanding that hallucinations are still a real problem that we're all sort of grappling with?
Yeah, so I'm going to relate to latest news, OpenAI model 01. And one of the things that we noticed is that it's further have a few more thinking steps. I heard one of the executive in OpenAI saying like it's a system 2 thinking, if I'm relating to Daniel, and he related to Daniel Kahneman's thinking fast and slow. I think that was, I hope it's okay to say, a bit of exaggeration. Like I would say that maybe it was like thinking fast a bit like within steps, and it's still like really thinking fast, and the hallucination actually in some case was dropped or reduced, but in some cases actually they become worse because it kind of like build on top of its own hallucination. Why am I saying that regarding to your question? Because usually in software development, with the expectation from developers from AI assistant while they're writing their code is almost spit out the output. I need output right now, even if I'm letting you think about it. Okay, think about it 10 seconds. Give me a full in 15 seconds. Give me like the entire project that I'm asking for. And that's a problem even for AI, and it's like a longer discussion, like a few podcasts, like I can send to. Basically, other tools that are more focused on testing, quality, security, they would be probably thinking slow, either thinking slow in the background, thinking slow, like being concentrated in certain processes. So even with the most advanced model that is supposedly planned, like was engineered to thinking steps in order to reflect and remove hallucination, it's not solved. You need the additional tools that incorporate different techniques, thinking and a different framework thinking, putting it in a human way of discussion here, in order to make sure that There's no bad code there of different type of bad code.
Absolutely. And then we can talk about human in the loop and other ways to, potentially sort of close that gap. Lucy, you've mentioned a couple of times now sort of the developer experience of all this. So I'm interested to maybe kind of have you close this one out. Like, if I'm a developer, how should I be thinking about the security coming out of code generation, coding assistant type tools? And like, what might I want to be extra aware of as I think about, the reliability from a risk perspective of using some of these tools?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are feeling kind of scared about machine learning or generative AI. I would say the most important aspect is kind of a lot of it is acting as a black box, like the underlying model, transformer, whatever, ChatGPT, they're black box. Like, it's hard to understand what exactly is going on under the hood. And what's more important is also machine learning is kind of a lot of that is statistical, it's undeterministic. It's hard to say 100% what's going to happen. No one knows that. So that kind of adds another layer about kind of how complexity on how to kind of manage security out of a somewhat undeterministic practice. So I'll say what's helpful for that is to make it more open, give more control to the enterprise, to the developer on what they want to use, on to understand what exactly is being using. So for Tabby, we have been the most popular open source AI coding project in this field, and we have all our source code fully available on GitHub. So we give a lot of the control for the company, for the developer to kind of customize the stack, choosing what model they want to use and what kind of knowledge to index into that, and show them what exactly we're doing in your code. And so that kind of really helps with enterprises when they're adopting kind of AI coding, and to help with the internal audit to understand what's happening under the hood. I think that's been really helpful for a lot of enterprise and developers. And another aspect is kind of AI model governance. I think a lot of folks here has been mentioned that a lot, kind of what model they're using, how the model is being trained, what data goes into the model is getting trained. A lot of that we demand more kind of openness around this, and giving that control to the user, to the customer, to make the choice they want to use. So
Yep.
I think all of that have been very helpful to kind of help with the security management out of the generative AI.
Absolutely. And just a lot of open questions here, right? And I think it really underscores the importance of continuous innovation and collaboration in this space among the vendors of coding assistant type tools like yourselves, and in the security community as well. And that's why at Sneak, we are always announcing new partnerships. And, maybe what we've talked about today is a little bit of a preview of some upcoming announcements around some of our plans as we help really the rest of the industry grapple with these security concerns around coding assistants. So we're just about at time today. I did want to thank all of you for joining our panel. And if you wouldn't mind, I want to go around the horn one last time. I have just one final question. Would love maybe in one sentence to understand, look, if we go fast forward 3 to 5 years, how will fundamentally the act of being a software developer change, right, as an advent of these tools? Maybe Jeff, will start with you.
Probably more prompting will be modifying code than actually writing code.
Yeah. Itamar, what do you think?
I think either you're going to write much more technical specification, or you're actually going to deal with very, very complicated software. You use AI to deal with type of software that we just couldn't do before because our head couldn't get around it.
Yeah, I like the differentiation of the understanding again versus the duration. Lucy, is that the way it kind of looks to you as well?
Yeah, I think the future of the coding assistant will be kind of deeper collaboration between AI and developers. AI will be kind of naturally embedded in all aspects of the developer lifecycle, and the experience will be very seamless.
Yeah, let's all hope so. Brandon, final thought. Where do you see the kind of craft of software development going?
Sure. I mean, I think the question behind the question is, what should we do over the next 5 years so we're there? So I'm going to be super blunt. Hey, learn the basics. Learn your, why it works, not how, why and how it works. Because again, to the prompting and everything, what do we have to understand? We understand the basics of all the basic ways in which you code. So like, got to learn that. You can't sidestep it. And I think the risk, of course, becomes we can produce code, but we don't know why. So again, getting back to the basics, that's the place, and nuanced around the mathematics and pieces that can implement to Itamars. I think that's what we're going to see. So know why, it's not just about productive volume of code. It's going to be why that code works is going to be the most important thing as a developer in 5 years.
Well, I hope we can have this conversation again in 5 years and see which one of us is correct. Again, thank you to all of our panelists. If you'd like to find out more about what we are doing at Snyk to help secure machine-generated code, you can find out more on our GenAI partner page on snyk.io. Again, thank you to our panelists. Really enjoyed the conversation today. And thank all of you for joining us for this webinar on the future of machine-generated code. Thanks and enjoy your day.